We're back with the bike packing custom frame build at the Bender Bikes workshop. And I'm really excited about this one. Today we get into the ultra nitty gritty, very nerdy stuff, very specific to frame building ideas, stuff that normally I don't think a lot of us would think about, but I think it's cool because I collect all these old bikes and get to hear about all this history with, this was made then and there and here and these people were involved. And I think of the bike as a cool piece of history, but I've never really thought of all the little things that go into it. I think this is kind of an interesting way to go deeper into the mind of a bike builder. So I say let's just cut to the next shot and you'll see what's up.
For me, this is just like a sanity check, but I've built this little sheet that just kind of keeps my brain organized a bit. I start with the top tube. Top tube I know is 31.7 and it's an 868. Seat tube 35 and it has a 20-degree bend in it. Down tube is a 38 mil. So I just kind of go through and make sure that that's what they are. So, which I've kind of already done that with these ones a little bit, so I know that one is correct. Then top tube. And so then on here, I can read it. When it talks about butts, it has 5 numbers. Basically, it's the length of the butt, the length of the taper, the middle section, taper, and then the butt. So we got 80 on either side. Sometimes the butts are different on each side. Yeah. And you'll have to kind of figure out which one has the long side. So a lot of manufacturers will either paint one side, which is typically the long side, or a lot of people have like a little device that they can put in with and it'll kind of it'll show the thickness so you can figure out which side is the right butt. In this case, we don't have to do that because it's 80 millimeters on both sides. That's where my butt lands. I just try to transfer the line across the whole length. And just roll it and hold your hand. So then I know that both butts are right there. The next step with each tube, as I go through this checklist, is to make sure. A lot of times the tube actually has a bend to it. It's very, very subtle, but it does have some kind of deflection. So what I do, and that's what this surface plate is for. This surface plate is dead flat, and I know that. And so then I can set the tube on it, and if I look at like underneath the tube, at some point I'm going to see a little bit of light shining through, so I'm going to know that that's where the arc is.
Oh yeah.
So see, as I roll it, you see that light comes through?
Yeah.
So I try to find where there's the most light coming through. And so that's right about there. So I know that that is the top of the arc. Basically, you want to put the arc in line with the frame. So I can either put that as the top or the bottom. But when I'm in line with the frame, I don't want the arc to go this way. I want it to either go up or down. So again, you're not going to visually notice it, but when you put it on a surface plate, you will notice it. So that's one of the first steps I do, is to just mark the top of every tube. Right there.
Do you find that slight bend changes the characteristics of like a flex of the bike at all?
I don't no. I think it's too minimal. But I think, in theory, it's just eliminating any chance for it to not be aligned properly. So then I'm gonna keep going on the list here and just make sure I have everything. So I have 2 chain stays, seat stays, 5/8, head tube. For this design, we're using a 100 millimeter head tube, and so I just want to make sure that it's right and don't want to ever put anything in there the wrong way. So yeah, it's 100 millimeters, and I usually just write it on the front so I know. And then I usually put the person's name on the head tube so I know whose bike it is. Bottom bracket, again, just checking that it is a 73. I usually label them, but you never know. So it is. So 73 BSA. Dropouts. Again, we talked about them earlier, but we're using adjustable dropouts. So just making sure that they're the right ones. Then the next step in this checklist is confirming the number of bottles. When I say bottles, I always mean just double ones.
Okay.
So it's just going to be 2 bottles. For the triple bottles, we're going to have 2 on the fork, 2 on the rear, and 1 on the down tube. So we're going to have 5. And then rack mounts, just confirming we have front rack and rear rack. Fender mounts, we're not doing fender mounts, so don't need to worry about that. Chainring size, I know that we're using my yoke, so I know that it's going to fit a 36 tooth. Tire size, just I'm confirming that we're going to do a max of 2.6. Confirm the hub spacing. For this bike, we're using boost spacing, so hub spacing is going to be 148. Rotor size, we're going 180s front and rear. Custom bag mounts, we're not really doing anything custom outside of the triple rack. So with custom bag mounts, a lot of times that could be, some people will do a bolt on like snack bag, or like if they're going to bolt in a frame bag. So that's what I put for custom bag mounts. The last step is just confirming the cable routing. We're doing external. I do everything kind of in the bottom. So I do bottom of the seat stay and then up the bottom of the down tube. So we're doing external. Again, this is just a sanity check. And also for me, it's like, hey, if I ever hire someone, then there's some kind of procedure in place. But more than anything, it's for myself, just to make sure that I have my head wrapped around the bike I'm building. Most of the tubing comes from a few different places. The brand is either going to be, I use like a mix of Dedachai, Columbus, or Tengay. So for this bike, we have Dedachai. As far as like suppliers, there's a handful in the US. So most of this tubing has come from, it's called Bike Fab Supply. It's a guy, his name is Andrew, in Arizona, I think. And then most of the dropouts, head tubes come from Paragon Machine Works, and a lot of the small parts. They're kind of the go-to for any kind of frame building like parts. So they're in California. Great people. With the seat tube, we need to figure out exactly where the bend is located on the bike, and just figure out where we're going to miter it and cut the top off. From the center of the bottom bracket to the start of the bend on my drawing is 30 millimeters. So that's helpful. So then I can basically go 30 millimeters from here, from the start of the bend backwards. And that is going to be the center of my bottom bracket. And then if I want to figure out the top spot, where to cut it. So we have a overall seat tube length of 450 millimeters. And our seat collar is 76. So 450 minus 76, 374. So then I basically just mark from the center, where we marked the center of the BB, to 374, right there. And so that's where we need to cut it, so that when we put the insert in, it'll be the 450. So now I just kind of have like the basic layout for all the tubes of kind of what the butts are, where the bends are, and where things need to be cut. Our check sheet is done. Our tubing is all confirmed and marked. So that's kind of the first step. The next step is to set up our fixture. So this is what's called a frame fixture or frame jig. People have different names for it, but this basically holds all the tubes in place in the proper position according to our design. So we can cut everything and put it in this fixture so it'll hold it all in space properly before it gets welded. With this fixture, everything is kind of based off of the bottom bracket, as you know, would be 0, 0 if you're talking about kind of X, Y axis. So this would be 0. So in BikeCAD, it's also very nice because it spits out numbers for specific frame fixtures. So in there, I can just create a document that has all the numbers related to this fixture for that specific bike. We'll start with the chainstay. So this number is actually just it's not the chainstay length, it's the horizontal distance. So on here, on my drawing, it's 430. So I can just adjust this and just push it over till the edge lines up with 430. and I know that's in the right spot. Next is our bottom bracket height, which we have is 68 millimeters. On this one, there's a small scale right here, the little notch that kind of gives you your number. And so I can just find 68. Yep, so 68. So now my bottom bracket height is set. The next one is basically, it's not, I mean, it's similar to the reach, but it's basically a reach number. So it's from the bottom bracket to the bottom of the head tube. And so that's going to be this number here. So we have 496. So loosen these. 496. And then same, we have a vertical number, which is 514. So 514 right there. And then the next step is our angles. So this is what's called a digital angle finder. And so this helps us, I use it all the time. It's like one of my most used tools probably. So this is going to be our flat reference. These two are dead flat in relation to the frame. So I'm just going to put that there and then I'm going to zero it. So that's at 0. And so I know for my head tube angle, we have 67.8. So if I put this on this section now, and then loosen this, boom, 67.8. Perfect. So then, and I just always double check again, so I'll just set it here, kind of run through the process one more time. Zero it out. $67.8. Perfect. So that's now our head tube is set. So, and then I'll do the same thing for the seat tube. The one thing that's a little bit different with, if you have a straight seat tube, then this is going to be the exact number as the seat tube angle. With a bent seat tube, it's actually a little bit different because you're not using a straight tube. So you're basically going from the bottom bracket to the top of the seat post or seat tube instead of just like the exact angle. So it's just a little different, but in our computer program, it spits out the right number. So in this case, it's 75.7. Boom. So then that's good. The last step is aligning our bottom bracket. So because bottom brackets have different widths, we need to adjust where that line's in space with the frame. So all of these points are in line with each other, which is in line with the frame. And on here, on this fixture, it has little marks for different shell widths so that you can just align it properly. So on this little thing here, we can adjust or screw in, these little things so that we can push in if it's a bigger bottom bracket or pull it out if it's a skinnier bottom bracket. So this one's already set. The last bike I built was a 73 millimeter shell, but I just want to confirm that it's lined up at the 73 mark so that we're using the right shell. And that's it. So now the frame is the fixture is ready for things to go in it. So I just try not to touch those things at all. So I know that those are right. And then basically we're just going to put the tubes in to connect to the points basically. So, which we can start with the head tube. The head tube is the first one and it's easy because we don't have to do anything. So head tube goes in and boom, there it is. One down. It's coming together. The next step is to put together the dropouts with a dummy axle. We have our inserts and our dropout. So just putting them together with the bolts. I've had this three-way since I was 18 or something. These are the dropouts and they are now mounted to what's called a dummy axle. So this basically sets the dropouts at a specific hub spacing and just kind of sets the standard for having it in the fixture without having a hub in there. So that's what a dummy axle is. And with these in here, we also need to make sure that they're aligned. So we want to make sure that they sit, even with each other and they're not off kilter. So the way I do that is, again, with the surface plate, I know that this thing is dead flat. And then I have these machinist blocks that I also know are dead flat. And so what I do, we'll just show you when they're undone, but so like if they're like that, it's like, you know, they're not straight. So I basically will use the bottoms of them and then the bottoms of the dropout as a reference. And I know, so when I lay them here, then I can tighten it once they're kind of resting on there, and I know that they will be on the same plane as each other. And then I can just kind of feel and make sure that they don't kind of rock back and forth. And then we're good. So this just slides in here and it has a little indexing section. And that keeps it, I know, dead center on the frame line. And then the last thing to try to make sure is that I prefer the dropouts to be horizontal to the ground. Some people will maybe put them like in line with the chainstay, or I mean, it kind of depends, but I just try to have this line be dead straight with the frame. So there's a couple ways to do it, but I just usually, again, I know that these two bars are going to be centered with the, or flat with the ground. So again, zero it out. And then I can kind of rest that on that part. And I can just twist it until it's zeroed out. Boom. And then I know that those dropouts are now, the slider section is going to be horizontal to the ground. And so yeah, those are kind of the starts of the frame fixture. Okay, the other thing with bottom brackets is the threads are different on each side because they're, you know, reverse thread on one of them. So you got to make sure that it goes in the frame the right way because it can easily get flipped. So Paragon does a really awesome thing, and they have there's a little line cut inside of the edge of the bottom bracket, and so I know that that's the drive side. The bottom bracket just goes right in here. I'll just put it in there for now, but. Just like that. So what I'm going to do now is just mark a rough miter length. So on my drawing here, again, the computer can spit out all the numbers for my specific lengths of miter. And so for the top tube here, on the top of the top tube is what we're looking at, the miter length is 554 millimeters from the inside of the miter to the inside of the miter. So I just want to make sure that they land within those butts in a good appropriate place. So I will just kind of line it up. If I have 554. So usually like you could be biased on the head tube side for the butt because, you know, a lot of the stress is going to come at the head tube. So I usually put the longer butt section at the head tube. And if the tube has a thicker butt, then I'll put the thicker butt at the head tube. So I'm just going to mark my 0. And that's a cut, and then I'm going to mark it 554. And so those are our cut lengths. Again, I'll show when I miter this, but that's kind of like a rough cut. I usually kind of inch up on it and make sure it fits perfectly. Next step to kind of prep things for mitering is I use what's called a tube block. So tube blocks basically are they're perfectly fit to the diameter of the tube, and I leave them on the tube just so I can clamp it in the vise when I mill it, but I just put them on. I put one on each side, and then I use the surface plate to make sure that the blocks are in phase with each other, and so they're not like sitting crooked. So I just kind of put them both on here, and then I just screw them down. The main reason why I would do this is because some of the miters on the bike frame aren't in line with each other. And I also want either they are in line with each other or they're 90 degrees from each other. So in the example of a top tube, you know, when we cut this one, it's going to be the seat tube is going to get cut here and the head tube is going to get cut here. And I want to make sure that tube is not rolled in between cuts. So I can use the tube block will hold it perfectly perpendicular with the cutter. And so that way I know that those two cuts are going to be perfectly in line with each other. And this one I put a little bit farther back because the angle at this one is pretty, I mean, it's steep, the cut is. And so if I put it really close to that line, that's the top line. So that bottom line is going to be like under here more. So I just set it back a little bit farther. The other thing that's cool about frame building is there's like a million, like there's no like standard way to do things. Like there's, you know, like building a house or something, there's like, oh, this is the rule and this is how you follow construction and all that kind of stuff. But with frame building, like it's kind of choose your own adventure. And so whatever works for you, like everyone has, what I've learned is like everyone has a slightly different process to the way they do things. And depending on their machines or their tool set, like it's all a little bit different.
I'm over here now. I put a chair down here. So, yeah, clean up the trash pile. You know, pretty sick. I gotta say, like, all those little things I just didn't think about before. It's been so interesting to sit and watch the process of a bike getting built. And on top of that, it's like having new bike day every time I go over to his shop to like film a section and watch the bike come to life. It's just really exciting. I wanted to cut it off before we got to the mitering because things start to move a lot faster. And I think that those like setup details are important to the understanding of like how much work goes into making a handmade frame. I know there were some comments about like the cost of a frame, but honestly, I think with all of the thought and the time that goes into making that frame, it kind of makes sense. I really hope you guys are enjoying this series. I am beyond stoked to be able to make this. I need to give a massive shout out to Will for letting us come over to his shop, check out what goes on, and building this frame with me. It's been an extremely informative experience, and it's made me so much closer to this bike. Speaking of the bike, it's already done. As I'm filming this, it's done. You don't know that. You don't know what it looks like. But as soon as you've gotten to this point in the video, I will be packing up for my first bike packing trip. Me and Quinn are going out. I'm super excited to share all of that. We're going to have little sneak peeks over on Instagram, so if you don't follow me there, go follow me on Instagram. It's linked down in the description. Trying not to show the bike off quite yet because just want to keep you on your toes, keep you guessing. I'd love to see how many people can guess the color that I painted the bike. So if you want to leave a comment about that, that'd be really cool. And also, if you want to tell me what you want to see more of or less of in the upcoming videos, I took a lot of footage and it's a lot to edit, kind of figuring out my style, editing someone else's process. So yeah, I hope you're enjoying it. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. I gotta turn off the camera. Right. Chair's pretty comfortable.